you've ever played an RPG or tabletop fantasy game, you'd know that there is a wealth of monsters, creatures, and conundrums you can encounter within a few short minutes. I've always thought that those things that went bump in the night in the darkest depths of the dungeon were interesting for many reasons. When I was young, I would read books about the little creatures you could meet along your adventures. I think one of my favorites were the tiny dragon companions that were about the size of an average ferret. They seemed like the perfect creature to have as a friend during your travels. But there's always a much darker, more sinister side of them that lurks in the most mundane places. A creature that can be unavoidable in the best of circumstances, and one that can induce the most steadfast adventurer with a paranoia only thought to be legend. I figure at this point you're asking your screen, why is Eggs being so damn cryptic about this? No reason in particular, but I think you'd ought to be ready to indulge with me into the fascinating world of mimics. In the 1980s, shortly after Dungeons & Dragons gained the boom of popularity amongst the nerds and dweebs of the world, video game production studios and developers saw an opportunity. They noticed that this little tabletop roleplay game could net them some new players and some new funds for future projects. With that in mind, they began to subtly include dungeon monsters and classes into their games. One monster that came up frequently was the Mimic, a monster notorious for its evolutionary ability to resemble a mundane object in an unassuming locale. Commonly, you'd see these as treasure chests, but there are a few cases of mimics taking on other forms such as doors, walls, windows, mirrors, barrels, and so on. In 1983, Ed Greenwood compiled and wrote a short bestiary of the creature using existing lore and new lore he'd weaved himself. Here's a short excerpt from the bestiary. From the journals of Merlin the Scholar. The mimic is a curious and dangerous creature to most minds, but few know or care to know that there are actually several related species of mimic, divided into two groups. A larger, quote-unquote, killer variety that is of lesser intelligence, attacking all nearby prey, and does not speak. And the more intelligent, eloquent species, which will often bargain for food, has a curious, as yet unfathomable by me, language of its own, and often speaks Orcish, the common tongue, Dwarvish, and other tongues used in the vicinity of the individual creature's hunting ground. The mimic gains its name from its ability to alter not only its body, but the color and texture of the outer surface as well. The color and texture changes are accomplished by shifting of pigmented liquid between the interior and exterior body cells, so that the creature resembles wood or stone in color and texture, depending on whether this pigmented liquid is brought to the outer surface of the creature's body or stored internally. While that's just a taste of the history of mimics, I think the well of knowledge has since gotten so much deeper than just a silly and scary dungeon monster. Its entire existence has branched into areas that, for lack of a better phrase, it just doesn't belong. One of my favorite instances of the mimic is within the backrooms. Recently, thanks to Waffles, I've been diving deeper into creepypastas and backrooms lore. I find that kind of thing interesting in that it can be quite literally anything you want it to be as a creator. I've been considering making my own levels, something safe and friendly, perhaps. We'll see. I did say I would consider making and telling scary stories for y'all to enjoy while I work. Apparently, there have been many reported mimics in the various levels, at least 50 of them contain a mimic of some kind from what I'm seeing, but obviously that can change at any point. That was a lot of info. I feel like I should get into the actual artwork now. You've been watching me work on this month's rewards for coffee. I posted a few weeks ago now that I'd be holding a vote for this month's rewards that supporters can vote on. Unfortunately, no one voted, so I'll be figuring out a different way of doing that from now on, possibly through an Instagram poll on my stories. As a backup plan, I rolled a number and spun the wheel with the 4 options and landed on Techno Mimic. The first step in my process is writing out my ideas. With the help of Waffles, I came up with a list that had general technology on it. With that list complete, I then started doing a few small doodles and thumbnails in my sketchbook. That I used as a rough roadmap to my final idea. I like to think this helps as an artist's process, but in reality, it's so I don't forget the ideas I already had, because my ADHD will make me forget something within an hour. First thing I worked on were the 2 sticker designs. These were made with smaller pieces of technology in mind. A pair of headphones, a watch, things of that nature. I didn't want to go with my typical polished style, so I took some inspiration from Milky Tomatoes with a simplified design. As you can see, it only worked a bit. I like doing this since it allows me to work a bit faster and not think too much about the overall process. It's also easier to print since I don't have to worry about the small details appearing or not. I hope that I can outsource these to one of my favorite manufacturers one day. I've used Sticker App a few times in the past, and the quality that I receive from them is always amazing. Even when I sent them a design with terribly tiny details and a bad overall design, they made it work and it still looks great to this day. I would love to get these guys printed on transparent stickers from them at some point. The next thing I'm working on is the illustration. I couldn't settle on anything but the colors of this piece. Even after weeks of thinking about it, thumbnailing, and asking for others' opinions, the only element of this I was positive about were the colors. At the moment, I'm very attached to triads. 3 colors that complement each other, like red, yellow, and green, or orange, green, and purple. This piece for me had to be a triad of some kind. Originally, I hoped to make it a primary triad with a bright burning red as the focal element. As far as the composition goes, I feel like this one was a real challenge for me. I'm never sure of my compositions, and until after I finish the piece, I'm still unsure of if the composition works or not. So I'm sure past me was stressing about it being the way he wanted it to be. If I could say anything towards that, it's that these kinds of projects will force me to study harder and get better. A pitfall that turned into a benefit, in my opinion. Now that we've finished chatting about the work and the history of mimics, I'd like to bring you back into the world of mimics with something that I feel will give you a small drop of information regarding my thoughts on techno mimics and this piece in general. Do you know the history of the modern computer? It tells just like any other good buddy invention story. Two friends hanging out in their garage, building something they couldn't fathom before. I don't think they meant to open the door to this horror show, but they did. While they were advancing, creating new pathways for knowledge and awe-inspiring change, the little things that go overlooked were watching. That's not to say that they weren't always watching, but they were watching closer now. Generally, humans can be very obtuse towards their surroundings. And things easily go forgotten. Grandma's old locket, Grandpa's war uniform, the toy box you'd gotten when you were 5. Big things that just collect dust, or small things that end up lost to time. They look just like them. Even the most minute detail is the same. A chip, a gash, a stain. Back in the 80s, there were a few tech nerds that went missing. No one could tell you where they'd gone or why they hadn't come back. Apparently, they worked for the government on a lot of freelance projects. One day, this guy, I don't remember his name, something Charlistian. He went to this remote server house. It wasn't a big building or anything, a simple 1-bedroom bungalow style building in the middle of the desert, with a massive radio dish on top. He said inside seemed totally normal, pretty clean cut. A few computers, fans. Now, this guy is no tech genius, so he couldn't tell anyone what the place was actually used for. Regardless, he kept going in. And then he found the server room. This place was massive on the inside, and pretty modern. No dust or grime in sight. In the back corner, there was an old PC that was turned on. Seemed like a pretty typical DOS system. You input a command and it spits back out a canned phrase of whether or not it could do the task you assigned it. Charlistian decided that if it was on, maybe it had answers. Well, when he pressed down on the key, it felt soft. Squishy, even. Before he could really react, he started hearing this growling behind him. Some of the servers in the room had shifted around, facing him directly. The computer let out an awful hiss as the glass from the CRT monitor cracked and popped. He shot around to see this beast. Its teeth were the worst part, he said. Each of them were different, gnarled, chipped, and discolored. If it weren't for that scaring him shitless, he probably wouldn't have made it out. Apparently, as he was trying to make his escape, the thing launched its tongue at him, snatching his arm, but he was already on the move by that point. He got this nasty bluish scar on his arm now. Before he left, he took a glance back only to see one of the servers towering over him in the doorway. Its maw was wide, and rows of teeth lined this thing's throat. It was bleeding all over the ground, too. The only thing stopping it from eating Charlistian was the door frame. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a labor of love, and I hope that the next video is just as fun for you guys. If you have any questions or comments or anything, please feel free to put it in the comment section below. And as I said before, the video is about our coffee rewards this month, and if you would like to get the coffee rewards this month, please go subscribe to the highest tier, the $15 tier on my coffee before the end of the month. This way I can ship out the reward to you, okay? If you have any suggestions for new videos or suggestions for next month's rewards, go ahead and put them in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so that you guys get notified every time I upload a new video. Alright? Much love. I will see you next time.